All right. Bowtied Silverback, welcome to Mind of a Lion. Thanks for jumping on today. Before we dive in, just want to mention your Substack, which is below bowtiedsilverback.substack.com, covering operational security, personal security, offline and online for us pseudo-anons and aspiring sovereign individuals. We'll share out the link, but definitely subscribe to Silverback Substack when you get a chance. Silverback, we were just talking offline about the playing cards, and those just came in. So kind of, if listeners not familiar, it's a full card deck that's got a bunch of different bow-tied animals. You got bull, silverback, ox is the jack, Rafiki's the king, sponge, maybe 3 or 4. Shared a photo today in your Twitter, Silverback. Love it. Kind of, what was your first reaction when you got the deck of cards?
Oh, I mean, they're absolutely amazing. You and I spoke via DM briefly that I actually collect vintage and rare casino decks. I've got about 500 decks stacked up in my office. Mr. Silverback is not thrilled, by the way. And these are amazing. You absolutely nailed it. These are going to be Christmas gifts for some of my nearest and dearest friends. And for people that are actually interested in cards, the quality is top notch.
For those kind of not familiar, what is an office full of playing card decks from decades ago look like? Like, I'm looking for a picture in my mind.
Messy.
Of course.
So I've got a few that are actually in display boxes. There's 1 or 2 decks that they don't make anymore, and for whatever reason people became interested in them. They're worth a few $100s, but for the most part it's for my own enjoyment. Some people collect postage stamps, some people collect baseball cards. Back in the day, my son, young Howler Monkey, collected Pokemon cards. And so it's just something that I've always enjoyed. Fairly early in life, I got interested in the old time, gambling cheats and sleight of hand. And it just kind of spun out from there. So I've actually tried a couple bottom deals and dealing seconds with your deck. And it works great for anyone who's interested.
Well, it's great to know the bow tie playing card deck can be used to be a complete degenerate.
Do not cheat your friends at poker. But if you were going to, these cards work great.
Silverback, have you seen, what was it? Green Zone with Matt Damon, about the Green Zone in like Baghdad during the Iraq War, with the movie?
I have, but it's been a very long time.
So in the movie, the soldiers, American soldiers in Iraq, they have a deck of cards. And
I'm familiar.
Each playing card corresponds to a different high value target. So I think it was the Jack of Clubs that they were looking at, and they're like, this guy we saw in the house looks like the Jack of Clubs. So that's kind of where I got some inspiration for, And of course, Ox is the jack because that came to mind. And Rafiki is the king because he made the Genimals NFC collection. I definitely look forward to here's my playing card deck, and I'm looking for pocket 10s, but really I'm looking for this animal. And then I was rambling and getting to Dark Knight with Heath Ledger. And there's a scene, he comes out and he whips out a playing card, and I forget what it says, but it's just kind of like a fun gimmick. What if I just start dropping bow-tied animals, slipping the playing cards in random places, and no one will understand the context right now?
I genuinely want to go around to all of my local banks and just drop those cards at the teller windows. Because I think that's just going to be amazing. It may be the best troll yet.
Photos out in the field of laying Easter eggs around town in the form of bow tie cards. Good stuff. So diving into your Substack, and your background. So your first article deals with more of that offline physical security for your home. For listeners not familiar, you mentioned threat modeling, opportunistic attacks, like someone finds your house is unlocked so they can just walk in, versus a targeted attack. They're looking for you, maybe because they know you got a lot of money or crypto or whatever. You mentioned using motion lights, having dogs. So I'm curious, without getting too personal or doxing yourself, how did you kind of select your home where you would situate your family for years to come? And for me, a younger guy, like I'm kind of thinking, like, I know bulldog, turkey, they're out in the mountains in the Rockies, like how to kind of set up that family compound from the start.
Yeah, for sure. And for, any listener that might be interested, I'll give you a little bit of a background. This all really spun about from some early conversations between Mr. Ox, Mr. Platypus, and myself. I think it was almost over a month ago. There were, at the time, I believe, less than 50 animals in the jungle. And it was actually Platy that gave me the idea. He was concerned that some of the younger animals were perhaps putting themselves at risk. They were putting out way too much information for a pseudo-anon account. They're linking their wallets where someone could potentially easily see either their transactions or the size of their bag, and they were just flexing in general. And he was genuinely concerned.
They were being clowns.
Yeah, I don't want to call them clowns. They were putting out more information than perhaps was necessary.
Okay.
And I thought that this was perhaps where I could add a little bit of value. I'm an old guy. I am an absolute noob when it comes to cryptocurrency, decentralized finance. I'm learning so much from you younger guys. But this is some subject that I had a little knowledge in, and it's also a personal interest of mine. So I thought this is the way I could contribute. What I want to make clear is I absolutely do not want to oversell my credentials in this area at all. I had a fairly brief and relatively uneventful career in military intelligence. My current role involves...
Now hold up there, Silverback. As someone who may or may not have a clearance, I don't think the word military and intelligence ever go in the same sentence.
Well, it's an oxymoron. It's kind of like Jumbo.
What were you saying before I...
I was going to say, and my current role involves some monitoring and investigations for my organizations. I'm just very lucky in that I've maintained some close friendships with active and retired military and active and retired LEOs. Well, no, wait, you're lying. Active and retired law enforcement officers.
Law enforcement.
So, I mean, and if you really, really want to see paranoid, sit around drinking with a bunch of old cops. When I started,
what's that like? I mean, just shooting the shit with some retired Leos or law enforcement. Just looking for a picture in my mind what that might look like, feel like.
Grumpy old dudes complaining incessantly. But we do talk about stuff like I don't want my wife's school or my kid's school to know my address. Why is that car driving by my house all the time? That kind of stuff. Like I said, they're a very old paranoid bunch. But as the benefit was, as I'm kind of jotting down these ideas for tweet threads or whatever, I was able to run some ideas by them, get their feedback. I'm also really good friends with the chief information security officer at my current organization. He and I'll grab a couple of beers or grab lunch a couple times a week. He knows that I'm very much interested in information security. And what we found out together is that his team, while they're very sharp in the IT department, they've got some significant blind spots as it relates to things like physical security and social engineering. And so, we're able to talk shop, share some ideas. But as I said, I don't want to overstate my credentials in any way. Everything in my Substack is meant to be a very entry-level 101 type information for folks that might be interested in the subject. There's literally libraries that are written on every single Substack if people are interested.
Where does that sense of, you mentioned paranoia, whether it's justified or not, where is that coming from in these mainly retired or former law enforcement, military, intelligence background people?
Sure. So a great example is I currently live in a fairly rural community adjacent to a very large West Coast city. And if you're a retired cop, you don't want to run into the guy that you put away for 10 years at your local Walmart.
Right.
I have a good friend who put their full 20 in, and they're now retired military intelligence, and they were a victim of the LinkedIn hack. So all of their personal information is now out there on the web, and they're not happy about it. And it's just about, it's that threat model, right? If you're in a job where you're working for the military, for the government, in law enforcement, there are people that just won't like you based on what you did for a living. And, you absolutely have to take steps to protect yourself and your family. And it's not about being paranoid. It's about just being proactive and making sure that you and your family are safe.
In your Substack article on levels of personal security, listeners not familiar, you have, we'll say, three levels. Basic, for most people who are not trying to be anonymous. You've got the jungle animal level. You want to be pseudo-anonymous and secure their, what's probably mostly crypto money and their privacy. And then level 3, degen autist, people high net worth, maybe they're in the intelligence community, people who might be specifically targeted because they have valuable information, and their communication should stay encrypted for the most part. How is this need or the sense of having to secure yourself online changed in the last 20 years? And really the birth and growth of internet, social media in the last 10 years. I'm trying to get, because I was so young then, kind of a visualization of how this threat or the need for OpSec has evolved.
Well, the need for OpSec has existed forever.
Offline.
I mean, going back to Caesar, to the Napoleonic Wars. Online, it's recently become an issue. 20, 30 years ago, Facebook didn't exist. Twitter didn't exist. Instagram didn't exist. If you had a cell phone, you could use it to make phone calls, and that's about it. But now we have, our entire lives are online. For someone who's really willing to dig and look into it. So it has absolutely evolved. I was going to talk about this a little bit later if you wanted to just kind of get into my personal background, but
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
In my mid 30s, I don't know. Can I swear on this podcast, or are we keeping PG-13?
This is an 18 plus mature audiences only.
In my mid 30s, I got a wild hair up my ass and went back to law school. And I had never had a Facebook account. I had never had a Facebook account. But when I went to law school, I had to have one because so many of our classes and our studies groups created Facebook groups to interact. So I had to sign up for Facebook. And that was really weird for me. And so, it morphs. I talked a little bit about, back in the day, and by back in the day, I mean the 80s. You wanted your name in the phone book, in the white pages. But now your entire life can be put out online. And my goal is just, I want people to be smart. I want them to be safe. I don't want them to post stuff that could potentially put them and their families in danger.
Is it almost a inversion where, because so much is defaulted to being online internet, now it's more so subtraction? You've got to fight to get things off, versus before the internet, you had to fight to get things out there, like in a Yellow Pages or a mailing list.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
You mentioned, we were discussing offline, the Dunning-Kruger effect. So for listeners not familiar, it's kind of, if you graph competence versus confidence, you get a cup and handle shape. And those who know the least are generally pretty confident, and the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And in Silverback, you always mention in Discord chats or whatnot, you always use a tagline like, I'm not going to oversell myself for an old ape, blah, blah, blah. And I find, whether it's dingo, puppy, there's this general sense of humility in many people in the jungle, that there's so many high caliber people putting out content, sharing value, that we feel like sometimes we can't keep up. Is that resonating with you?
Oh, no, absolutely. And I think a sense of humility is a sign of, absolute, one, confidence, and two, knowledge. The person who's exceptionally arrogant or talks the loudest in the room is typically the person who knows the less or knows the least. I will say there's this fascinating dichotomy as I've gotten older, and this is, sample size equals 1, so take it for whatever it's worth. But on one hand, I am more confident than I have ever been. I know what I've done. I know what I know. I know what I bring to the table. And to be perfectly frank, if you're not a close friend or a family member, I really don't give a shit what you think about me.
Hell yeah.
On the other side, I have never been more humble than I am now. I am keenly aware of how much I do not know, and how much that I have the opportunity to learn from you younger animals.
Does it, to make an analogy, what is like a 20-something-year-old who's, let's say right now, they're getting in crypto, DeFi, this decentralization, separation of money and state, yada, yada. What did that demographic seem like in the birth of the internet 20 years ago? Is it the same? Is it a similar mindset, or is it a different? I'm trying to get a feel for what.
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me touch on the generational thing first, and then we'll talk about the 90s and the internet first rolling out. First, I want to say that I'm actually very skeptical of that whole millennial versus Generation X versus Boomer thing. I think that 20-year-olds are going to act like 20-year-olds. Middle-aged dudes are going to act like middle-aged dudes, and us old guys we're going to act like old guys. This hasn't changed. I'm old enough to remember when my company would bring in HR consultants to give presentations on how to integrate Gen X into the workplace. We were the
doesn't Gen X run the workplace now?
we were the original slackers, after all.
That's where
I
we
mean,
learned it from. All right.
they've been making money off this shtick for decades. Nothing's really changed. I think maybe they update their slide decks every 10 to 20 years, but that's about it. I mean, if you go back 2,000 years, you've got Socrates, and he's complaining about the youth of Athens. And I'm going to do my best to quote him verbatim, but he's talking about the children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for their elders and chatter out of place. They're now the tyrants of their home, not the servants.
That sounds familiar.
They contradict their parents. And forgive me, Barbary. Does any of this sound familiar at all?
All of it sounds familiar. you could place my name or some of my other friends and family names, and you get the same story.
Yeah. So I think if anything, in general, over the last 2,000 years, younger people have a degree of contempt for old guys like me because we are old and out of touch. Dinosaurs, if you will. On my Twitter thing, I talk about DB80. Don't be a dinosaur.
DB80. Don't be a dinosaur.
I absolutely know that's how 21-year-old Silverback felt.
Is it
and these
a change in risk aversion? Oh, go ahead.
What's that?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say us old guys have got this contempt for younger people because maybe they are inexperienced or sometimes immature. But if both groups realized how much they could actually learn from one another, we'd all be so much better off.
Is that pattern across generations, is it young people being more risk, or what's the word? Older generations risk averse and younger generations more apt to taking risk? Or is there, I'm trying to look for a way to simply describe such a complex phenomenon.
Yeah, no, I think that's part of it. And that's a good thing, right? If you are 20 years old, 30 years old, single without kids, you should be levering up on risk. Absolutely. If 23-year-old Silverback, quote unquote, lost it all one day, he'd be out a couple grand and maybe a futon. You're never going to have that opportunity again to make mistakes. So yeah, go all in when you're young, by all means.
Asymmetric payoff is, so Bitcoin and crypto as a whole, it seems to be what they call an asymmetric payoff, where you're either going to lose 100% of your investment or you're going to make 10,000%, 100,000%. Like you lose 1x, you gain 100x.
Yeah, I mean,
one or the other. There's no in between.
I don't think you're going to lose 100%.
Sure.
And in very rare situations, unless you were a super early adopter, I don't know that you're going to gain 1,000%. But I will tell you that it looks, feels, and smells a whole lot like the internet in the 90s.
That's where I was going to go next. And Mark Cuban, of course, talks about this a day after his getting rug pulled in DeFi. What are the parallels? Like, what was the vibe? Like, right now, everyone 18, even younger, they've got a Robinhood account now and they're day trading or whatever. They see Dave Portnoy do it and they think it's cool. Like, and you read about the Great Depression where it's like the old adage, if your taxi driver is giving stock tips, it's time to sell. What was it like on the ground in the 90s, the internet boom? In the news, your friends and family.
So this is an over 18 podcast, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So I started my first job after the military, out of college, at Morgan Stanley. And this was around 1996. So this was right after Netscape IPO'd. I think that AOL IPO'd around 92, but Netscape was the real game changer. I mean, the company hadn't even turned a profit yet. And yet by the end of the first day of trading, it was worth almost $3 billion. Maybe today it's not unusual for companies to go public before they're profitable, but back in the 90s, that was almost unheard of.
Before Starbucks and the Enron, a lot more companies went.
Way before that, for sure.
Yeah.
Returns on internet stocks, they were nuts. People were doubling their investment in a year's time, which, again, may not be completely unusual today, but was absolutely unheard of at the time. From 95 to 2000, I think the NASDAQ was up over 4,000 or 400%. There were several companies that actually legally changed their name to include the word .com just to increase their market share. Right. It was nuts. Traditional valuation, the Warren Buffett model was completely out the window. People were going to invest in any company, and it didn't matter what the company did as long as it was involved in the internet or the .com arena. If you look at 1 year, 1999, Qualcomm was up over 2,000%. What also happened, and you mentioned,
of course, we still use that today
earlier, which is a great parallel. Average middle-class Americans were investing in stocks for the first time at an unprecedented level.
So retail came in. They got out of mutual funds.
This is where the term day trading was coined, right?
Okay.
I mean, prior to that, we all had our 401ks and we invested in our mutual funds and blah, 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 blah. But people were investing in individual equities for the first time ever at a rate that you couldn't imagine today. Hell, Morgan Stanley, when I was there, we even lowered our minimum on trading accounts just to bring more people in. We were more
what was the minimum
to take their money
when they changed it?
When I first started for a trading account, it was $5,000, which in 2021 doesn't sound like a lot of money.
Yeah, it's maybe 25 grand, 20 grand.
1996, it was,
that's a
car.
It was
a threshold. Yeah. That dropped to $500.
There you go.
And so absolutely, my friends and we were the young green brokers, and we were convinced we were geniuses. We're getting paid to make our clients rich.
Right.
And as an old ape, I will say that was probably the biggest lesson to me after the bubble crash, which is never confuse a bull market for your own intellect.
Everyone's a genius in a bull market.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all thought we were geniuses. And then the bubble crashed and we realized, well, no, we're still kind of idiots. But the takeaway from this was, despite all the speculation, all the so-called bubbles, it really did change the world. It was a true industry disruptor. It changed how we do business, how we communicate with each other.
How we socialize, how we travel.
How we socialize, absolutely. It's really hard to believe that, at the time, there were a lot of smart people who thought the internet was, quote unquote, a fad. And so, people made a lot of money. Some people lost a lot of money, but it really did change the world. And to me, as an old ape, that's absolutely what this feels like right now. We are, in fact, changing the world.
One block at a time. Or one shit post at a time. History rhymes, of course. How did, and I'm sure a few people did, of course, Mark Cuban, the example of the DeFi rug pull yesterday, he somehow sold all of Yahoo stock at the top in 99, 2000.
Mark
seeing
did well for
how,
himself.
right, he did do well for himself. Seeing how the dot-com bubble ended, what is a way, a theory, a guess onto how the current crypto bubble and everything bubble might pop? Like, what is an avenue or a set of events that could kind of induce that?
You know, I don't know that I'd call it a bubble, to be honest. And
I say it in a good way. Every
Yeah,
disruption technology has a bubble.
And you know, I think one of my first tweets as a bow-tied animal in the jungle was talking about realizing some industry disruptions throughout my life that occurred, and saying that you know, if you're really lucky, you might have one or two of these in your lifetime, and you need to capitalize on it. You know, I was a user of cryptocurrency way before I was an investor. And there was just something about this idea of a decentralized currency that's not controlled by any bank, it's not controlled by any government. It really spoke to the libertarian in me.
Right. So coming from that libertarian mindset, what specifically about sovereign money that is outside, that is a separation of money and state, kind of drew you in? Like,
well, that's great. No, great question.
Welcome, Sponge. Stopping in. Welcome, Sponge.
What's up, Barb? What's up, Silverback?
Mr. Sponge, how are you, sir?
Oh, dude, I'm absorbing all this. I'm ready to go.
So, Silverback, what got you into the rabbit hole of internet money, that separation of money and state, that libertarian drop? I'm trying to get a picture in my mind here. What did that look like?
Again, old ape,
Johnny Kruger effect.
TradFi guy for the last, almost 3 decades. I was a user way before I was an investor. I love the idea of a currency or an asset that wasn't controlled by a government or a bank. And once I started thinking about it as an asset, that's when I got really intrigued. And I look like a shaved ape. I am an old knuckle dragger. But I also read everything I can get my hands on. So once I started seeing this as an asset that could be invested in, I went down that rabbit hole, and I started seeing things like blockchain, smart contracts, the ability to move capital seamlessly around the world without a middleman. And I apologize if I'm being redundant, but these are things that are going to literally change the world that we live in. And right now, in my opinion, as an old guy, as a Luddite, we're only in the AOL and Netscape phase of this game. We're helping to build the underlying infrastructure. The future applications absolutely blow my mind. The DeFi Googles, Amazons, they haven't even been invented yet.
Interesting.
That said, I suspect that, you know, young guys like y'all and Mr. Robin probably have some pretty good ideas about the direction this needs to go. But this is in the infancy stage. This is AOL. This is MySpace.
Yeah, no, that's the part that's really amazing about all of this. The fact that, like, you know, if you looked at Google, you know, maybe, 20 years ago, was Google even a thing 20 years ago? I mean, maybe it was, but, in the early days, it was a simple search engine, right? And you wouldn't think to yourself that that's going to be all that powerful, right? You look at it and you say, oh, okay, I want to look up, cat pictures, and then you type in, cat pictures, cat videos, right? It's like, okay, that's what's going to pop up. And you think to yourself, oh, okay, well, that's all it's going to be. And then, fast forward 10 years and it ate the entire advertising industry. It's wrapping up all of telecommunications, period. And, it's controlling even political discourse because it was able to eat up all of the aggregation of information more generally, right? And so the fact that, crypto is, and it's funny too, because Like, if we were to view technologies as having a politics to some degree, like we've had a series of highly centralized, highly authoritarian technologies. Like Google as a search engine is an authoritarian technology because it relies on a single arbiter, a single set of centralized controls to search through a thing, right? As opposed to a more open source system or through a more decentralized network, which is actually what we're going to. So like for the first time in a long time, we actually have technological evolutions that are in their character libertarian.
Isn't any centralized power that determines what is true and what is not authoritarian? Isn't that playing God?
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be. Like, it has no choice. I mean, I think that that's the other thing too. I think that people and technologies and governments even are a lot more shaped by their environments and by the tools that are available to them. You know, it's like what Marshall McLuhan said, that the medium is the message, right? I think that applies very heavily here.
Medium is the message. Silverback, the guys you'll have a beer with, who were out of the game, whether it's intelligence, law enforcement, etc. Are any of them exploring cryptocurrency, or at least do they have a formed opinion on this landscape?
Oh, it is crazy. Last weekend I went to two events. One was a birthday party for a friend of young howler monkeys, where the dads were hanging out talking. The other one was a friend's 50th birthday party. Crypto came up every time, and there were really two stages of thought. One was, this is awesome, let's talk about it, how do I get more involved? And the other was, well, I don't know, I was reading an article, or CNN said that crypto is used by drug dealers and terrorists, blah 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 blah. And what I really tried to do was just almost set the record straight, right? And I would tell them, I'm like, well, in the 80s, they said the same thing about bearer bonds, and they became illegal. And for any of your listeners that don't know what bearer bonds are, just Google it. But
those are clown rug pulls, right?
Wait, bearer who?
Yeah, right, exactly. But it came down to, this is something that a government or a bank can't track and control, so we don't like it, therefore it's used by criminals. The same thing with $1,000 bills, $500 bills. They started out with, these are used by drug dealers, so they're bad, and we have to get rid of them. And it was, well, no, this allows individuals to accumulate and transfer a significant sum of money without government control. I'm an old banker, even though banks are zeros, but I'm an old banker. We have a thing called a currency transaction report, where if you try to withdraw or deposit more than $10,000 in cash, we've got to fill out a form and send it to the U.S. Treasury to say that Jimmy Barbary had more than $10,000 in cash, and God forbid if you try to leave the country with more than that in currency. And so with these older vets, with these older cops, what I try to talk to them about is, this is about control. You want to know what drug dealers and terrorists really, really like? It's cash. It's the US dollar. Yeah. No one's talking about that. If you doubt me, roll up on the corner to your local crack dealer and ask them if they accept Ethereum and what their wallet is. You may or may not.
I don't know about yours, and mine keeps up with the times.
Well, I'm old, but the mask that a lot of folks my age are seeing is, it's for drug dealers and terrorists. No, it's not, but that's the narrative, because a government or a bank can't control it. And I may or may not have gotten a few converts out of it. Mrs. Silverback just rolls her eyes and walks away. We'll see what happens. But I do know of at least one retired cop that just bought his first hardware wallet. So I'm a happy camper.
Good stuff.
Yeah, no, Silverback's 100% right about that. The government controls everybody on a very local level by controlling both your mobility and your ability to take your funds with you. They will like it very much when your funds are places where they can turn the switches on and off if you do things they don't like. And they don't remind you about things like the fact that, if a state government, for example, can, almost unilaterally pull money out of any bank account if it just, issues an order that's approved by a judge, right? I mean, that happened in New Jersey to the Attila's gym. There's that gym that was staying open during the COVID lockdowns, and they had kept
for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Kept $140,000 for their legal defense in a fund in the bank, and they had refused to pay the fines, as was their right, until the judge ordered them to do so. Which they hadn't gotten to the Supreme Court yet, so they didn't actually have to follow through on it. So they just took the money straight out of the bank account, wiped out their legal defense fund just because they could. And that's how they want you to be. They want you to be at their mercy.
I absolutely do not want to get conspiracy theorists on your podcast. I'm not someone who is, about conspiracies and the government is out to get you. But, my law degree, the emphasis is in tax law. And I had a lot of friends ask me, why are you studying tax? Tax is boring shit. And my answer was because the IRS scares the shit out of me.
Yep.
They could just take it.
Yeah.
They literally can. As a banker, I could see liens being put on people's accounts, and that was the end of it. Your money's gone. The IRS said no. And that's terrifying to me. So I want to get more versed in tax law. In the United States, for our international listeners, there are only 2 crimes that the U.S. government has deemed so horrific, so terrible, that there is no statute of limitations on. One of those is murder. The second is tax evasion.
Of course.
Perfect.
There's that scene from Breaking Bad, or maybe it's Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, and they haven't seen the show about the great show, meth dealers. Well, Jesse Pinkman, the protege meth dealer, he's in the salon where they're laundering money, and Saul Goodman, the lawyer, rolls in. He goes, "Jesse, what do you think the government thinks when they see a young guy like you driving around in a nice car, throwing around money?" And Jesse goes, "They think I'm a drug dealer." Jimmy goes, "No, even worse. You're a tax cheat."
Well, I mean, a lot of the time that has to be the case. And the funny thing is, there are creative ways to lower your tax burden too. And that's why it's important, for example, to, unless, you have to work for some sort of large corporation by the nature of your profession. If you can, be independent in any way and have your own small business, there's 1,000,001 ways to make sure you have a lower tax burden. I think this year, my effective tax rate was around 10%, right?
For sure. And if you own your own business, you've got way more flexibility than if you're a W-2 employee. We have an animal in the jungle, Patrick, that,
Oh yeah, Patrick came on my podcast. We're going to be releasing that soon. He's awesome.
As an old CFP, as a non-practicing tax attorney, I can absolutely confirm Patrick is 100% legit. He's got great information. But yeah, if you're owning your own business, or running a couple of businesses, you have way more flexibility and options than if you're a W-2 employee. And that was one of the general principles that I really wanted to talk about on this podcast in terms of personal security, which was, just don't stand out. You don't need to post pictures of your Lamborghini or your Rolex on Instagram. keep yourself at an even keel so you don't attract unnecessary attention or attention that you may not want. I apologize if I hijacked the conversation and brought it back to personal security.
No, that's actually really important. I mean, because that's something we're going to be struggling with. I mean, I want to get your take on something, Silverback, and maybe I'll make this public a little bit sooner than before. But I'm not going to tweet about this too much, so people have to listen all the way, like 45 minutes into Barb's podcast to get this information. But one of the projects that I'm thinking about doing in the next while is to start getting some coordinated lobbying efforts out of the jungle, right? And I tweeted a thread that I think you've retweeted a little bit back about how a little bit about how I think,
absolutely did. I know where you're going with this for sure.
Yeah, because I think that it's kind of ridiculous that we would all just sit back and let the clown banks make the rules for everything. Right, when it comes to tax laws, when it comes to crypto disclosures, when it comes to all those things. So, if we had some people that were able to push back a little bit, I feel like that'd be good. At least influence someone and slow them down, because that'll save us a lot of money. If we can even just slow them down, that'd be a lot. Something I want to comment on, though, I want to get your take on. How do you actually balance that with your own security? Right, because if we actually do start, making moves like this, we would actually probably have to use our legal names when we're communicating with these politicians. How do we ensure that there isn't retribution?
That's tough. And to my knowledge, at least where I live, there's not a good answer. You do have to use your legal name. It becomes a matter of public record. What you have donated to, and it gets it gets really difficult. That said, I think it's absolutely imperative to get more involved in this. I'm an old guy. I just want to be left alone, to be honest. But as someone smarter than me once said, that even if you're not interested in politics, at some point politics will take an interest in you.
Well said. Well said.
So, again, someone smarter than me said it.
So corporate mock, if you're not familiar, the account, the guy who's dying of a terminal illness allegedly tweets about Machiavellianism and stuff, but he goes, saying you're above politics and you stay out of politics is a privilege, and that privilege is going away. Like now, even if you try to avoid politics, it's coming after you. Whether it's COVID stuff or
I think we can draw the line on avoiding to some degree the petty partisanship. But I view any involvement that we would have in politics akin to an insurance policy. Right.
You could theoretically create a PAC, a political action committee. And then all donations would be routed through them, and someone would have to dig a lot deeper to find out who you were, versus donating individually to a candidate.
Right. But that's something I've actually managed before too. So I've run a PAC in the past.
But it's if you decide to get involved in politics, and the old ape was very involved in politics in his early 20s. He was very passionate. But you do not have any anonymity at all. It's all very forward facing. But yeah, you can create a PAC, you can create a nonprofit, and at the very least, people will have to dig through a couple of extra layers, but you won't have any privacy or anonymity for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so we can approach this from two different perspectives, right? Because I think the way where we could maintain at least some security is by the fact that we're being diffuse. I think maybe creating a PAC might actually open us up to some sort of attack much more easily than if we were individual people coordinating, somewhat secretly, that then just, targeted a handful of politicians to just persuade them on a very kind one-on-one level. Just, show up to one of their parties, donate a couple $1,000, have a conversation, just be like, hey, XYZ about crypto, just so you know, it really isn't, tax evaders only and drug dealers only. It's also people who are just liberty minded. And I think that
I think that's absolutely fair. And Barbary, I think it was Barbary that created that Substack where make a few donations, go to a few dinners. You don't have to say I'm donating to you because I want you to support cryptocurrency or decentralized finance. You just donate, and then when you show up to the dinner, that's where you have the conversation. And
the only charity
easier way of doing it
is anonymous charity. At the end of the day, if your identity is known with a charitable donation, it's virtue signaling in some capacity.
I mean, this isn't even charity at this point. It's just a security policy, right? Because
I'm gonna pause real quick, Sponge. Do a radio check with Cayman. Cayman.
Hey y'all, we good?
Hey Cayman. The listener's not familiar. Cayman is he's got a background as a Leo, as Silverback calls him, law enforcement. And,
Dad.
Oh my God.
Thanks for jumping on, Cayman. Just real quick, Cayman.
Guns, parochial school.
Go ahead. Cayman, what's your thoughts? I mean, you've been listening in the last few minutes. What's kind of the perspective?
Very interesting. I didn't know that Silverback also had a experience in law enforcement. I kind of gathered from his diction he was probably a veteran.
No law enforcement background, just legal background.
Gotcha, partner.
And military intelligence as well.
Word.
Well, the nice thing about the jungle is everyone here is incredibly humble and undersells themselves, so I absolutely do not want to overstate my credentials.
No, for sure. I'll let you guys know right up now. The only things I know about in life are a little bit of law enforcement. I wasn't on the street for too long, just a couple years. I know a little bit about construction management and from side gigs, a little bit of private investigation. That's my forte.
What's the general? I'm trying to get a read on the mindset of, and Silverback's talking about people he has drinks with, former Leos, former military, etc. What do these older crowd or experienced crowds think of Bitcoin and decentralization in the context of civil liberties? Like, do they see it as a weapon against it or as a tool? I'm just trying to get a picture in my mind.
Well, I will say that my experience with law enforcement officers are typically of the small town variety or the very large city variety. So you're thinking of a force of between maybe 20 dudes or, several thousand. And I think that the culture gap between small departments and huge departments is much less than their culture gap between small departments and big departments against medium-sized cities. Maybe say a force of 70 to 150, 200, less than 1,000 cops. And the reason I say that is, in my general experience, cops who work in middle-sized cities are very integrated with their community, while the small-town cops and the large city cops are looking for a good parallel here, they're a separate class. They're the Casatrias. They're the Praetorian Guard. They stand apart. So with these small town guys and these big city guys who in many cases enjoy a special status within their communities, I think that they have a less amenable position against Bitcoin or crypto in general, just because they are, in my experience, the most caught up in the conspiracies that Silverback was mentioning. Only fucking drug dealers use it, only cops use it, and blah blah blah. Yeah, just bullshit like that. But you get some guys who actually give a shit about civil liberties, and these are much more often to be the more integrated medium-sized city cops than the big city slickers or the fucking podunk, country cops. If anyone in law enforcement in that culture, and it's a very distinct culture, no matter where you're serving, those guys who, identify as citizens more so than they identify as law enforcement, those will be the most amenable to crypto and decentralization in general.
Cool. Interesting.
I have a question
I think
for
Cayman nailed it right there. That's if you're going to record a section and put it out on Twitter, that's what you put out.
52, 53. Yes.
Yeah. So I have
my notes.
I have a question for Cayman too, and this is sort of jumping a little bit off of crypto because the same community we have here, I think, is also very much interested in issues of liberty more generally, right?
Sure.
How do you square the responsibilities that law enforcement officers have had over the last year, with a lot of them, folding under the pressure to enforce a lot of obviously ridiculous orders about COVID lockdowns and depriving people of rights? Whereas, like, I saw some departments that were like really good about it, and they were able to, stand their ground and actually do the right thing. I mean, what sort of pressures do law enforcement officers face, and how do they manage that burden? Since I imagine you probably speak to a bunch of them.
Sure. I actually have an interesting perspective on this. I just want to let you guys know I've been out of the game for like 5, 6, 7 years now. So my perspective is on current events is only influenced from what I read in the news. I follow the beats. I follow the all the cop blogs, the Facebook private groups, all the cop shit posting avenues, and then my in real life friends in various departments within the greater Chicago metropolitan area, including several within the CPD. So Chicago uniquely had a issue with civil unrest, riots, all that kind of crap. I don't know if you guys were aware, but we had the National Guard deployed out here for like 3 or 4 goddamn months. It was ridiculous. I have all these awesome photos from my GoPro of being in traffic lights, being stuck at red lights next to Humvees. It's pretty fucking bizarre. Yeah, so I will say that I think Chicago's lockdowns sucked. They didn't suck any more than usual. The only thing that honestly affected me too much was shutting down all the good restaurants, kind of crushed dating life, and then I couldn't even fucking drink off my woes in a bar. I mean, that sucked. Right. So
I was very fortunate in that the county that I live in, we had a sheriff that was willing to stand up, and which is really weird for the left coast. And he basically said, these lockdowns are bullshit. I'm not going to enforce it.
That is the same thing that happened in one of Chicago's quote unquote collar counties, the counties that surround Cook
Once that
County,
happened,
Illinois.
things opened up. Now you still had local PD that may or may not be enforcing stuff. So it had a very 1920s speakeasy vibe going on in some of the restaurants and bars. But this guy earned my vote next election cycle just for being willing to stand up and say, this is bullshit, and we're not going to enforce it.
Oh yeah, for fucking sure. So most of the Chicago bars and restaurants, and when I think of the COVID lockdowns, my first thought always goes to entertainment, dining and bars and shit like that. Because as far as policing civil liberties, that along with traffic stops is what I have the most experience doing. Responding to a bar at 3 a.m., kicking the drunks out, stopping fights, shit like that. So most of the places shut down voluntarily.
Years, so I appreciate that.
Most of the places shut down voluntarily and were very quiet. I did hear about a couple bar shutdowns, like speakeasy operations, but nothing that really hit my radar in a serious way. what ended up happening is that just people started throwing private venues at Airbnbs and shit like that. I mean, shit went low to ground really fucking fast. And unless, you know, people are pissing off fucking third floor balconies, there's nothing cops can do about to stop that. So whatever, people coped. One interesting anecdote is there is a very famous scummy dive bar in the city of Chicago that is still 100% like on the books, owned by the Chicago Mafia. And I'll give you the name of it if you want to DM me for it. It's a fun place. It's one of the only places left in the city where you can smoke indoors. That's a Midwestern legacy. It's gross. It's still cool. But they stayed open the entire lockdown, and no one gave a single solitary fuck about it. And I thought that was awesome. That is political grift. In Chicago, we call it juice. I don't know if that's an allusion to, you know, the Jewish faith or not, and lawyers, but they had the juice and they fucking drank it. So yeah, kudos to them. As far as reconciling responsibilities as a police officer with lockdowns and all that other shit like that, I'm sure you have a ton of guys who were convinced, or at least were at the early stages convinced, that they were serving a public good. Personally, I think that any destruction of business activity for anything that is less than blatantly life-threatening is complete bullshit. I really enjoyed and was fortunate in my police service that I was able to reconcile most of everything I did as a police officer with libertarian, freedom-minded sensibilities. Because, you know, if I was fucking you up, it's because you fucked someone else up and, you know, broke the NAP, as the meme goes, or you were on public roads and, you know, I can't have you fucking drunk driving.
Yeah,
I want to buy Cayman a beer.
Wait, and like that part's awesome. I mean, but the thing that like surprised me too was that, you know, there were a lot of them that went really far the other way, and
so,
you know,
if I may,
oh yeah, the shit in Canada, you guys
for
mentioned, that was terrible.
I have a very specific question for Mr. Kamen, only because this came up with some of the retired or old Leos that I drink with. And they've seen a lot of the really high quality young guys leave.
Right.
And the recruitment pool, frankly, at least where I live, because of, you know, defund the police, all cops are bastards. You know, your agency's going to turn your back on you if you make a mistake. They're not seeing the quality of recruits. Cayman, are you seeing that where you are as well, that just the quality of Leo recruits is falling off, or are you still seeing you know, good folks that want to do the right thing, they're applying for the job?
Everyone who I knew personally before joining the force is a good guy. However, you know, being on the street of Chicago just as a random civilian walking around, I cannot believe how terrible some of these Chicago recruits are. And I can't even, to be completely honest, I can't tell you if that's a recent thing. Back when I was younger and more naive, I actually tested for the Chicago police force. And for those of you not aware, it's a purely lottery, quote unquote, luck of the draw / political connection gig. When I sat for the exam in 2012, 2013, I was one of 15,000 applicants. And they were going to take like 1,000 within the first 2 years after the exam. You know, you'd wait, they call your number up, whatever. And they appointed a lottery number to each of us. And I scored I scored a 98 on the exam, the written exam, the first step. And my lottery number was 14,502.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that absolutely jives with what I've been hearing. Where I live, where they would get 500 applicants for an open position, maybe 5 years ago, and or 1,000 applicants, and now they're lucky to get 50 applicants for open position because people don't want the job anymore.
I want to clarify that I don't think the applicant pool has dropped in quality on the average. You might have a lot of guys who are, on the sharper side of things leaving just because they can make more money elsewhere. But as a whole, I don't think that the applicant pool is getting worse. I just think that the departments are much, much more desperate for recruits. I mean, the retirement boom in police officers is fucking massive. And that's, one, it's shifting demographics. It's two, how fucking awesome some police pensions are. And yeah, there is definitely a experience gap right now.
No, there's a big issue with that too. I mean, like I had a classmate of mine from high school who was rejected from every branch of the military because he scored so low on his ASVAB that as far as they were concerned, there was not a useful function in the military for which he could be trained. And the NYPD just hired him.
Awesome. I love that. Nothing I know more than a retarded police officer.
it's like, well,
I've met a couple of boiler techs and hull techs in my time. And whew, if you can't then, well,
that's what I'm saying.
True story. I have a very good friend who has turned out to be, in my opinion, an exceptional officer. He failed the psych test his first go around. And at the time, my response was, that's not something you should get a mulligan on. If you fail the psych test, you probably don't get to be a cop. He's redeemed himself since, but it was crazy that the recruitment process and where they drew the lines in the sand.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure that I failed a poly once just because I wasn't going to admit to anything. The polygraph test is literally designed. You can read up on this. There's actually a lawyer in Chicago that just specializes in recruits that have been kicked off the hiring list because of polygraph exams or whatever. And the examiners are just these fucking assholes from the Cook County Sheriff's Department that they grill. I haven't met them personally. This is just stories I've heard. They just fucking grill people on all sorts of things like, oh, are you sure you've never stolen anything? Did you ever grab candy from the store when you were 8 years old? And, I realize that sounds like a ridiculous parody. That's literally the shit that they ask. Or drug use. Are you sure you never used drugs or prescription medication after, your whatever had weared out so you didn't have an active prescription? It's like, man, people are signing up, throwing themselves. Your department's fucking desperate. What, do you not like these people? Because, like, I don't know. Recent example was because she was a black girl, scholar, fucking athlete at Northwestern University. She wants to become a cop. You don't like that? Does that piss you off a little bit? I mean, Jesus Christ. The hiring process for police officers is so long, so convoluted, and can be trashed by incompetent or flat out malicious people that it is completely fucked up, in my opinion. That's why you have so many shit cops.
It's impossible.
I would say the same for military intelligence. For the young animals listening, in my opinion, the takeaway from this is, don't lie to the investigator, for God's sakes. But also realize that investigator is not your friend, and they don't have your best interest at heart.
Yeah, no, it's an impossible job. I mean, that's the other thing too. Like you're being asked to maintain your cool under ridiculous situations with very, very little training to begin with. And I think there's a lot of circumstances also where, cops get involved and to be honest, like there really probably shouldn't be laws about such things to begin with. I mean, most traffic stops for things like speeding, I feel like we could probably take care of that with like a camera or two here or there. And, you know, worst comes to worst, like, you know, that's basically it. Like drunk and erratic driving, I think is a different story. But like, you know, there's a lot of police encounters that put them at risk that I think are just not worth the ROI on that at all.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for fucking sure. I mean, the risk of injury to a third party during a chase, even a foot chase, not just a pursuit in a vehicle. I mean, it's fucking absurd. Generally, you know, if you're in a position where you have discretion, you're only going to chase the fucking, this is kind of endemic to the Chicago area. Well, I know it's present in the Chicago area. I don't know how present it is for anyone else. You chase the guy who's doing 120 in a Dodge Hellcat going down the road. A, you do it because that guy's definitely going to kill someone, you know, as time series approaches infinity. Second of all, because it's really fucking fun, and everyone likes calling out the
No,
Silverback laugh.
Hell yeah.
No, I agree entirely. But like, I mean, the other problem too is like, you know, with use of force, like it gets really dangerous because like how little training there is. Like, for example, I have a lot of friends who are NYPD, and you know, they were talking to me about how they train them to respond in situations where they have to use a gun, and those guys are trained to empty their mags, right? And you know, their aim is not great. I'm better than all of them, and I'm a civilian. Okay, and so like the fact that, but that's an issue though, because if you're apprehending a target, I mean, like I know because I have a lot of like, you know, military friends too. Like in the military, and maybe Barbary can actually elaborate on this because you know he has more experience, Silverback as well. You know, I imagine they train you to be a little bit more accurate than that, and on purpose. And it is possible to get people to be accurate with the proper training.
I mean,
okay, one thing with the NYPD, you guys go first, but I have a very special account about NYPD.
There's an interesting dichotomy I find is, so for law enforcement, of course, Kamen can chime in, is they use dum-dum rounds or hollow points, which listeners not familiar, a hollow point expands on impact and tries to tumble inside the target. So it's less likely to go through and hit civilians or other crap behind target. Military, if they use dum-dum rounds, it's a war crime. You're going to Leavenworth.
So I mean,
also,
we refer to that as over penetration.
Over penetration. Well, when you put it like that, Silverback.
No, I mean, if you have a weapon in your home, you need to be keenly aware that, you know, drywall doesn't stop bullets. A nice, soft, hollow point round probably isn't going to leave the body of someone, and so you need to be aware of that. But yeah, you know, in the military, and you know, Ox will correct me on this if I'm wrong. I'm sure they still use, you know, full metal jacketed ammunition for that
range ammo, if you will. Not hollow.
Yeah, range ammo. You know, the crap, the cheap crap that you burn up at the range.
And different rules of engagement. Kamen, you mentioned in Chicago, with the lockdowns, the National Guard coming in, it reminds me of Cancun. So any spring breakers in the last few years in Cancun, they know the federales patrol the beach at night. So the hotels don't want you going to the beach after sundown. They won't stop you, but then you got guys in camouflage and AK-47s patrolling the beach. Why isn't the local police? Well, it seems to be the local police can't be trusted in the way that the Mexican military relatively can be trusted. So seeing like National Guard in DC or Chicago, I don't like it. I don't like when law enforcement can't get that order that the military has to come in. I think it's a terrifying precedent to have uniformed soldiers in your neighborhood.
Well, yeah. How much of that is optics to, you know, for the local politician to say, see how serious I'm taking this versus the actual effectiveness of local law enforcement?
Everything's optics, Silverback.
I'm old, but I'm slowly figuring that out.
So I will not personally comment on the situation in Mexico and how it relates to the situation in Chicago. I consider the two instances sort of related, but a little bit of an apples and oranges situation. Before going on to the NYPD anecdote, I do want to mention that when we use hollow point ammo, it is not to stop. I'm saying we, I mean police officers or even concealed carry people. We're not using hollow point ammo to stop penetration. We are using hollow point ammo because it is much more lethal than FMJ, Full Metal Jacket, flat out. That is the single primary reason we're using that. And this is something that has been pretty well documented within the last 30 years since hollow points became widespread and reliable, is that normal Full Metal Jacket pistol ammo is terribly ineffective at killing people fast. Most Full Metal Jacket ammo, unless it hits a vital, it's going to kill you by exsanguination. You're just going to bleed to death. And that's not fast enough to stop a gunfight. So be 100% sure of this. Quick.
No, but my concern when they get into this is not so much the nature of the rounds, but the volume of them. Like, you know, when I'm, I mean, I've done like a few rounds of training with some of my SOF friends, and just to make sure like I'm not like terrible with my gun, and like they always taught me to fire only like 1 or 2 rounds at my target. Right.
Oh, and, so if I may, and I'm going to refer to Mr. Kamen on this, because, you know, I was not combat arms, I was intelligence, but the volume of the rounds has to do with you stop when the threat is no longer a threat. You don't fire 2 shots and wait and see what happens. And, you know, even when I'm talking with young Howler Monkey, if you get in a fight, you don't throw a punch and then see what happens. You keep punching until that person is no longer a threat. And I think that has to do with the volume that you're talking about.
Well, no, I'm going after it from a different perspective.
If someone comes into my home and I shoot them 12 times, and an attorney asks me why did I shoot them 12 times, the answer is because my pistol did not hold 13 rounds.
Yeah, so I can actually speak to all that. Just want to say for the record that be under no false pretense. Cops use hollow point rounds because they're better at killing people than any other purpose. As for volume of fire, NYPD specifically, and I'm only mentioning them because you mentioned them first.
Right.
The NYPD not only has a dog shit training program
for their pistol, they're the worst.
But their firearms policy, this might have changed. I'm going on information that I was aware of in 2013, and I can definitely do the research for this afterwards. Their firearms policy was written by some, I'm not going to use the word SJW or woke, but some authority that had no firearms experience whatsoever, and they mandated the use of I believe 15-pound trigger in their Glock sidearms. And I don't know if you guys have ever shot a double action revolver before.
Oh yeah,
that is hard as fuck to shoot accurately with. So I definitely think that the NYPD's hit percentage of being like, 2% out of every 100 rounds fired definitely mostly has to do with that than anything else. So that volume of fire, all those bystanders getting hit specifically within New York and those surrounding areas, I think is a hell of a lot due to that policy and their piss poor firearms training in general.
Yeah, no, that's a real problem, and that's kind of the point I was trying to make before. I understand Silverback's point where he's saying that you have to keep firing until the threat's eliminated. But I mean, I think if you actually have proper training, you can eliminate the threat with only a few shots. My concern is that they get very scared when they start firing because they do not have the right training and they're not ready to actually shoot to kill, and they just empty their clip. right? Every single time. And the problem is the collateral damage from that is enormous. I mean, the number of people that I'm aware of that have killed someone accidentally because of the complete lack of training in those kinds of situations, and then they have to live with that afterwards too. I mean, that's just awful.
Oh yeah, no, definitely, for sure. And I will say that the situation with the NYPD is definitely atypical of most police officers in the U.S. I say most. I can't say, the vast majority. I am a combat footage, GoPro, police officer activity junkie. So I've seen a lot of shootings from Chicago cops, and I've seen a lot of shootings from New York City police officers, and there's just a fucking night and day difference. Like there was a recent video of NYPD, like guy pulled a gun at the top of the stairwell, the NYPD in a 3-flat or whatever, narrow door corridor, and you have all the NYPD cops a floor below, and they must have put fucking 50 rounds into the guy in the backstop. I mean, it was just ridiculous. You have police officers in Chicago, getting indicted because they're too good with their guns. You have some kid spin around to drop a weapon, and the cop sees it and nails the kid with a single headshot. So, I'm not praising Chicago Police Department. They definitely have their shortcomings, but compared to NYPD, they have much better, quote unquote, paramilitary training than the NYPD, for better or for worse.
Well, I mean, and the other problem too is that the average New York resident is completely unarmed, completely has no experience with firearms at all. I mean, to be honest, I wonder if a lot of the authoritarian tendencies out of New York have to do with just the kind of population density that exists there, right? Because that by itself just breeds ridiculous policies that you have to impose just so people can coexist. And then, to be the kind of person that has to enforce that, I mean, they just put these people in a ridiculous position at that point.
Yeah, you guys are the poster child for stop and frisk and all that kind of bullshit. I mean,
hey, don't say you guys. I'm out. I'm in Florida now.
I got you.
I bounced.
It's just that
I did not want to be around there.
You don't miss Uncle Bloomberg?
Podcasts. I definitely know, through podcasts, more people in New York City than I would probably know in any other scenario. So, it's a different world over there. And aside from the NYPD's veteran population, my brain really struggles to think about the average non-veteran recruit to the NYPD, being from the New York metro area. I mean, nobody has fucking guns unless they're from upstate up there. I mean, you get outside the Chicago city limits, fucking everyone owns guns.
Oh, you go to Gary, Indiana, Crown Point, you go buy all the guns you want, drive it back state line. Good to go.
I spent quite a lot of time in Gary, Indiana. I'm not going to elaborate on
sorry.
that. But, you are completely correct.
Listen, I'm speaking to you guys from the great state of Florida, where my Lord and Savior Ron DeSantis has permitted me to have god awfully many firearms in my apartment right now. I don't know why I ever moved away from Florida. I lived there for like two years. Yeah. Life gets in the way, but definitely look, I'll say this. If I ever put on a badge again, it's probably going to be in Florida. Dude, you should come through. Florida's a great time. Okay. I have literally everything. I bought an AR last week. Not that I didn't have one already, but I wanted one to match. I have. Yeah,
sometimes you just get the itch. I mean, I know
he's dual wielding now.
Dude, I have an SKS that I keep for when shit really hits the fan, because those motherfuckers never break. And I have a 100-round barrel mag that's like literally it's the most impractical thing in the world. But I just want to be able to fire forever and ever and ever and ever. Okay, and I have so much 7.62 that I could arm my whole freaking apartment building. I love it.
No, I mean, I think Eamon made an absolute solid point around young cops, young Leos. who, especially in big cities, they have no firearms experience. There's a guy named Dick Couch who is a great author. And one of the books he wrote was called Sua Sponte, the Forging of the Modern American Ranger. And I don't want to step on Mr. Ox's toes while talking about this. But in that book, one of the things they talked about was the challenge that the instructors had, because they would have entire classes where no one had ever been in a fist fight in their entire life. And so they'd go out to the sandpit and basically have to teach these young kids how to get punched in the face. And we're seeing that as a society of, you've got people who've never been in a fist fight, never been punched in the face, never fired a rifle, and now they're being put in a military or a law enforcement position. And I think it's to our detriment, to be honest.
It's a mess. Can you imagine like being in a fight if you've never taken a punch before? I mean, shoot, I can't speak to everybody else, but when young Sponge was really even more rambunctious than he currently is. I mean, I spent a bunch of years in Greece, and the kids there were pretty rough sometimes. So I used to get into fist fights very, very often. And thank God for that, because, I mean, it's the only way I learned some halfway decent self-defense.
Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I actually have a kind of unique theory on this. I mean, New York notwithstanding, generally, I think places that are really anti-gun, or, the legality of guns is much more restricted, you actually tend to get a lot of kids who, if they're at the least a little bit athletically inclined, they like to punch the shit out of each other in their early 20s. Because, you do that at a bar in Boston, you can be reasonably assured no one's going to pull a gun and fucking kill your ass. The south side of Chicago, people don't get into fist fights for no fucking reason.
I tell you what, though, they get pretty harsh on people. I mean, like when I was in high school, and this is something that became a policy. I don't know if it's a policy everywhere, but it was a very popular policy in New York when I was in high school there. They had a thing called like a zero tolerance policy for physical violence, which is really ridiculous, absolutely absurd. Because I used to get into fights, not because I didn't start any fights. I've literally never started a fight in my life. But you know what? I ended quite a few of them. And then I get suspended for that, and it was absurd.
It's absolutely a tough call. There's a older man now named Brandon that I owe an immense debt of gratitude to, because in the seventh grade he punched me dead in the mouth, and at that point I realized that you can't just run your mouth without consequences. And when I complained to the teacher looked at me and said, "Well, you deserved it because you were being a little jerk." Today, if that were to happen, that there would be that zero tolerance policy where both Brandon and I would be suspended, as opposed to Silverback spits a little blood in the sink and everyone goes on with their day. But I learned a very valuable lesson that I'm genuinely concerned that young people like young Howler Monkey aren't going to learn today.
Yes, and it's not just, because you're raised this zero tolerance policy against, good-natured male aggression, all that, minor shit like fist fights, whatever. It is uniquely a problem to the United States. And it is my suspicion that this lack of ability to, be aggressive and hit dudes in the face unless you actually go out for training, the fact that you will be arrested and dragged through the criminal justice system if you defend yourself in a bar fight when you're a dumbass college kid.
That's absurd.
That is probably feeding the fucking social dysfunction in America.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Guys have to brawl. It's some point in your life, you just got
100%.
Let kids roll. Let them fight. The best thing they can do at 10, 11, 12 years old is getting some fist fights, because they're at an age where they're highly unlikely to do any serious long-term damage to somebody. That changes when you're in your mid-20s. But
No, and
you know,
and it also
you know
gives
what
you
it
the
feels like to get hit in the face. You know what it feels like to hit someone else.
yeah.
And you also realize that, yeah, your words have consequences. You can't just run your mouth and expect zero consequences. And I think that's a valuable life skill for young men that, you know, the kids in America, including young Howler Monkey, are missing out on.
Yeah, and
The
the thing is,
zero
it gives
tolerance is absolute bullshit. That is a school board or a school administrator basically advocating any and all responsibility for making intelligent decisions.
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. And one more thing with the effects of, you know, getting into a fight when you're a kid or roughhousing and shit like that, you learn what it means to be physically hurt. And
yes.
by proxy of that, you learn the empathy of what it must feel like to hurt another human being. That is some shit that I think is probably lacking in this current generation.
No, it's a big problem. And I think the other thing that you get to is the ability to set your own boundaries, because as much as there's value to having someone else punch you in the face, there's actually value to you sometimes punching someone else in the face, right? I mean, I had this one kid when I was like 9 or 10. When I was in Greece, actually. Yeah. No, I used to get bullied pretty severely because but this was like way back. This is like back when the U.S. actually just invaded Iraq, and I was living in Greece, and there was actually some like pretty harsh anti-American sentiment. And so because I had just moved from America, there were a lot of kids who were picking on me because I was American, which is like a weird thing for people in the United States to hear about. But a whole bunch of them used to try to beat me up all the time. And, you know, at one point, you know, I had enough of it. I stopped running from them. I just beat the crap out of the leader. And that was the end of it. And then they left me alone after that. And I was able to I learned how to solve my own problems that way. And I learned that I don't need to stand down to people who are being ridiculous to me. And I grew a spine because of that. And I think that has a lot of value.
Oh, 1,000%. You know, one of the things I talk about in my Substacks is making yourself a hard target. And, you know, there's ways to visibly do that. But at the end of the day, punching the bully in the mouth is a very easy way to do it. You know, we joke about the jungle, but the fact is the jackal does not run up on the lion. He's looking for the old, weak zebra who may or may not have their face in their phone. And yeah, if you punch the bully in the mouth, you're usually good to go. You might get an ass whooping, but no good has ever come from giving the bully your lunch money. Nothing's ever gotten better after that.
Absolutely. And we're training a whole generation of people to think that, because the problem is like they always teach the kids, it's not just zero tolerance, it's zero tolerance and you should just tell a teacher. So you're training a whole generation of people that actually the way to solve your problems is not to do anything yourself. It's to get your ass kicked and then hope for the godlike authority to show up and solve it for you.
Got to step away, grab a beer, take a piss, not necessarily in that order.
You do you. We're not going to judge. But no, but there's a blog out there. I think that, you know, probably most young guys have heard of it, called Art of Manliness.
Yeah.
And you know, and one of his posts, I'm a big fan. He writes very, very well, even though I don't agree with 100% of what he said. He writes very, very well. He talked about the different types of societies, and one was an honor-based society where it's all about, you know, basically legalized dueling, right? But the other one was an authoritative-based society, which was, yeah, if someone picks on you or punches you in the mouth, you go and tell the teacher, and you rely on a third-party authority to fix your problem for you. And you know, while they both have pluses and minuses, honor-based societies historically have tended to fare way better long-term than the authoritative-based societies.
Yeah, no, people who can actually stand up for themselves and learn to do that consistently become better people in every possible respect. Like, I feel like that's something that actually keeps men in line. And this is actually a really interesting thing when it comes to comparing the modes of conflict between men and women. Like, well, if you have two guys of some reasonable
Men are
size,
physical, women are psychological warfare.
that's the thing. Like, if you have no, but it's more than that.
Way meaner.
Yeah, well, no,
Oh, yeah.
women are worse because
psychological warfare.
No, because it's worse than that, because it's not just psychological. It's that psychological warfare doesn't have an endpoint. Like between two guys, at the end of the day, you know, conflict can escalate. At some point, it gets physical, and then someone wins, and that's it, right? You know, and then you can bury the hatchet eventually, right? But women don't have that at all. It just goes in circles. And the thing is, they're training men to fight like women now.
No, you're 100% correct, and this concerns me as an old ape, because I have a son. He's going through high school right now, and I
right in the gauntlet.
Yeah, Barbary.
I said right in the gauntlet. Your son, right at that age.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We joke about a gogi in our house. And I completely lost my train of thought.
They're training boys to fight like women, like psychological.
Yeah, it's just a real problem, because I've noticed this with a lot of guys recently. Have you noticed, Silverback? Maybe you can tell me about this, because like you've had more experience than me. Because I've noticed that even just in the last few years, like that the kind of insults that people make are different. Like I have guys who like will insult me and say like, oh, you know, whatever you're doing, it's not a good look. Or like, you know, oh, why are you doing that? It's gonna make you look fat or something. Like they comment on my looks a lot. Like, whereas previous,
accused you of looking fat.
Wow. No.
You're a pussy. Like, when did that go out of fashion?
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. If I was criticizing someone, I'd be calling you a loser, right? I'd be focusing on your competence. I'd be saying,
or you're a pussy.
Right, exactly.
You told me early on that this was an NC-17 podcast, so I can.
No, please, yeah, no. You go up to a guy, you say
pussies everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. You say you're a pussy. You do whatever the fuck else. But you know that's how you insult a man. You don't fucking go after him like he's some little bitch. But like that's how people talk today. I'm serious. Yeah,
I can't comment on that, because I have to say that it's not an insult that.
Well, I wouldn't even register.
No one's ever levied an insult against my personal appearance, probably because I look exactly how you would expect. If you shaved an old silverback ape, that's pretty much how I look.
But for real though, like it's weird when you see like I've had people like criticize me and say like, oh, you look tired, or you look old, and I'm like. I'm first off, I'm 24 and I'm in decent shape. But even if that wasn't the case, okay, like what the hell is wrong with you that's the thing you came up with? Like,
that's all you got? Like, throw something at me.
Like seriously, like I'm.
That's what you're going with. All right.
Like for God's sake, I mean, I've had this happen a couple of times, and I'm genuinely confused. Like I don't get it. But like this is what I'm saying. It's always the same guys, by the way, who are following like 1,500 models on Instagram too. Because like you have this like category of like beta, like 18 to 30-year-old male who like follows like 100 models on Instagram, will like make those kinds of comments. And they have all this like bizarre feminine energy, and I'm just like, I do not understand at all what the hell's going on with these guys.
I'm genuinely more concerned that you know who they're following on Instagram more than anything else. But I'm an old guy, so that's hard.
I'm gonna dig into deep Gen X fucking Web 1.0 blog territory here, but there was a blog that I really enjoyed a little bit before my time, called The Last Psychiatrist. Yep. He said that the biggest thing with the rise of narcissism in the American culture was that we cannot feel guilt, only shame. So that way of insulting people is turned from you should feel guilty because you're an asshole has shifted. You should feel ashamed because other people are going to think you're an asshole.
Right. No, they use that social pressure.
So that's an interesting
brilliant
shame versus guilt, because a lot of art of manliness, Raul Tomasi, Rational Male, they talk about how shame and guilt men are driven by guilt, women are driven by shame. There's a dichotomy.
Yeah, no, but the problem is the men today are driven by shame. That's the thing.
Well, yeah.
They shame each other, and like, I don't even know if I don't even. Yeah, it's absurd. Okay,
No,
it's
but it's a brilliant observation, and I can't speak to Gen Y or millennials, but one of the things that Barbary and I talked about earlier in this podcast was that there's this great dichotomy that happens, or at least happened to me when I get older, sample size 1, in that I've reached a stage where I'm probably more confident than I've ever been. And if you're not a friend or a close family member, I really don't give a shit what you think about me. And that's almost been like a superpower over the last 10 years.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Because it's allowed me to do so many things that I normally, or young Silverback would not have ever done.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes a big difference because it frees you. It frees you from that kind of bondage, right? And I think, let me elaborate on what Cayman just said there. Okay, that men feel guilt, and sorry, it was Cayman or Barbary that was saying that, but that we transitioned certainly from using guilt to shame, and also that men are driven by guilt and women are driven by shame. I think that I lost my train of thought. I pulled the Silverback. Here we go.
Hey, Sponge, you should feel ashamed that other people are bothered that you lost your train of thought.
Well, no, I came back to it. I found it again.
I found it
again.
Scotch. I don't know what your problem is.
A few too many Lagunitas. But anyway, so no. What I was going to say is that shame is a response to that kind of social pressure, whereas guilt is a response to responsibility, right? So guilt comes from having set out your responsibilities and actually trying to manifest them, right?
Correct.
And it seems that
I have somehow failed in my role.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly.
I have failed in my responsibility to other people.
Right. And whereas the shame is just an entirely just flagellatory emotion to try to force conformity, right? It's a very authoritarian kind of thing. Like, you use shame as a top-down means of controlling people, right? Whereas guilt is a way that you can control yourself, right? And so, I mean, I think that the transition that Cayman started to talk about there is an extension of the overall recent transition towards more authoritarian systems that are really just trying to get, invasive into people's lives and, deprive them of that kind of internal self-control. Then that would then lead you to feel somewhat an amount of guilt, but also freedom from that kind of shame, the way Silverback has managed to accomplish.
Well, I think part of that is just being old. Because there is a dichotomy to that, in that while I say I've never been more confident, and I know what I know what I bring to the table. If you're not a friend or a family member, I don't really give a shit what you think. The flip side of that is I've really never been more humble in my entire life. I am keenly, if not painfully, aware of what I don't know, or how much I can learn from you younger guys. And so it's and God bless the jungle, because I hadn't had that type of introspection prior to talking with you folks. But yeah, no, it's a weird dichotomy. I've never been more confident as an old guy, but I've also never been more humble. I'm keenly aware of what I don't know. I'm keenly aware that you young folks, especially when you start talking about things like decentralized finance, software as a service, coding, there's so much I have to learn. And I think the goal is to reach that level of saying, no, I'm actually okay with where I'm at. I'm confident. I feel secure in what I've done. but also recognizing that I have so much more to learn.
Don't we all?
Yeah, no, and that's what makes you a really valuable member of the jungle, Silverback. I mean, the fact that you can balance those things. It's one of those really hard lines to thread, because a lot of us here come in with some amount of competence that we've already gained, right? And to be able to interact well with everybody else, right? You have to constantly put it down, and then also know when to bring it out. And how to bring it out in exactly the right way, right? So that people will actually receive it. I mean, I think I was watching a podcast with Jocko Willink, and one of the ways that he
equals freedom.
Yeah, absolutely, I love that guy. But one of the ways that he likened it was that I think he was using a metaphor with Echo of throwing a football.
Forgive me, and I don't want to interrupt. Who's talking right now?
Sponge is talking.
All right. Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah. So, he was using a metaphor with Echo Charles, and he was talking about throwing a football. And what he was saying was that, if you're trying to pass information to somebody or give somebody some kind of, advice or instruction, you have to make sure you're not throwing it too hard or it's going to hurt their hands. And at the same time, you also have to make sure that you're not throwing it that softly or not at all, right? Because then they'll fall short and they won't receive it. So it's one of those really hard pieces of balance that you need to strike.
Jordan Peterson said something pretty similar to that, and I believe it was one of his earlier Joe Rogan podcasts. He says you have to find that point of I think he calls it proximal development, where you're in flow. You are stressing yourself just enough to build mastery and make progress, but not enough to burn yourself out so that you feel too sore the next day to work out, and then you're not doing whatever you need to be doing for a week and you fall behind.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely applies to your personal development too. And then he also, I think, made a comment in the same podcast about how you should attempt to even suggest those kinds of edits for others, where you focus on the lowest level of analysis, the smallest possible change in behavior that would bring you closer to the behavior that you want with a person, and then change that and then incrementally adjust them towards the overall behavior that you actually want out of them, instead of just going full out and saying, oh, you're not doing the right thing. It's a lot better that way.
Absolutely. Everything is fucking inertia. I mean, in law enforcement, you deal with that on a daily basis. Okay, I need to get compliance out of you. I can definitely control your behavior a little bit by offering offering carrot instead of a stick. I mean, 1% increases over and over and over get you where you want to go.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a lot cheaper than violence, for example, as a means of control. Right. And that's why I think, for example, just to relate this back to our larger situation now, that, people are relying a lot more on those incentives. And we're like a lot, if whatever we're in right now is approaching a dystopia. And I don't think that it totally is, but part of it is, I guess. Right. It's very much more like Brave New World-ish than it is 1984. Just because of the nature of the incentives that are being used to control people, right? People are being controlled through pleasure, not through pain, not through coercion as much.
For sure. Everyone's going to die in a whimper, not in a blaze of glory.
Yep.
What's the saying? We will not go quietly into the night. We will not go without a fight, but yet we all die alone in the middle of the night somehow.
I'll speak for yourself, Barb. I ain't dying alone. Are you kidding me? But old Sponge is going to have a very rambunctious end. That much I assure you. Old Sponge is going to go out in a blaze of glory.
Yeah, I'm going down swinging.
Hell yeah, I'll drink to that.
Hey, Silverback's back. What's up, man?
Hey, sorry about that. I'm doing this on my phone, and I tried to switch back and forth and just lost contact.
It's all good.
I appreciate this is Silverback coming on, and I reached out to Sponge because when he pops in, it just spices things up when you get three-way. And then Cayman, I don't know how you found it, maybe the live stream, but I was trying to get Cayman on here, and the timing just kind of worked out.
Yeah, man. You sent me the message on Twitter, and then I clicked it, and I think it sent me to Facebook or something like that. Or
hell
I have
no
idea how I found this.
Wait, what? No, it wasn't supposed to send you to Facebook.
It sounds like a boomer thing to me.
I don't have Facebook, but if I apologize if I sent you to Facebook.
No, it's fine. I definitely just clicked on 3 different lives.
No, guys. No, Cayman's the Fed. Cayman's the Fed. Run, hide.
Exactly.
Cayman is not Fed. But there are at least 2 folks that are, using a very old playbook on Twitter.
Hint, hint. Damn.
Oh, okay.
All right. Without further ado, I'll wrap it up.
On that note.
Any lasting words from the gray-haired Silverback?
Yeah, actually, if I may, since we're talking about this, one, check out the Substack if you're interested, but more importantly, for you young animals who are just beasts, and I'm in awe of you. 100% honest. Read everything you can. Never stop learning. There was a great quote by General Mathis where he talked about how he was never really surprised by anything because even if he hadn't experienced it personally, he'd read about it. Bust your ass in your 20s and your 30s. So you're able to relax a little bit in your 40s. You're going to be absolutely shocked how your priorities change, especially once you get married and have kids. In your 20s, working a 12-hour day is literally only working half time. That said, take care of your health. We're going to rely on Mr. Hawks for that. But I will confirm that it is a hell of a lot easier to stay in shape than it is to get back in shape the older you get. And with that, just thanks for listening, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Thanks for letting an old man play along.
Absolutely, and thanks for sharing those playing card pictures. That's you'll play some Easter eggs
for sure. Anyone who's interested, check out Bowtie Barbary playing cards. They are amazing. I got a bunch. I'm going to be buying a bunch more. They are going to be my stocking stuffers for Christmas 2021.
You see a gorilla poker card lying around somewhere, you've been marked. Run. Your OpSec is no good. Cayman, any parting words kind of take away from this rambunctious conversation?
Sure. All tasks and interactions with other people are easier for all parties involved when you put a smile on your face. Be pleasant, be gentle with other people when you can. That's it.
Social dynamics or tact diplomacy. I love it. And that's coming from, I guess, a police officer is a salesman in one way, shape, or form. Awesome. Cheers. Sponge?
Do what Cayman tells you. Good rule.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. It makes a big difference. I mean, well, I don't know, man. We've covered a lot of really awesome ground tonight.
Yeah.
I just it's hard to summarize any of it, but I just wanted to thank everybody for coming on here. This whole platform, the ability to make these kinds of podcasts, I think, is going to revolutionize the way that we communicate as a jungle. I wrote a Substack about how to make a podcast, and I highly recommend that anybody here and anybody listening just take a peek at that, just in case, because the more voices that we have that can speak effectively, I think will improve our ability to reach out to more people and to bring people around to being able to take control of their lives and live free lives. And I think that's what all of us are after.
Bring the jungle to life.
That's right.
Hoorah.
Awesome.
Hey, and thank you, Mr. Barbary, for bringing us all together. Your work, your Substacks on being a sovereign individual, on being independent, have been just so very valuable to an old man. So thank you for everything you do. I'm so thrilled you guys are letting an old man play along. I'm learning so much from you guys. So again, thank you again.
Absolutely. Young ape, old ape, we're all relentless pursuit of freedom, one day at a time.
All right, gentlemen. Have a great evening.
All right, gentlemen. Yep. Have a great night.
Take care, partners.